Thanks so much for joining us for today's presentation, Teen Mental Health from Turbulence to Triumph. My name is David Diadana, and I'm the Senior Editor and Content Strategist responsible for the Public Health Program at Springer Publishing, an independent publisher known for innovative textbooks, professional references, and clinical products in the fields of nursing, behavioral and health sciences, and medicine. Before I introduce the presenter, please note that this webinar will be recorded, disseminated, and posted on our website in case you miss any part of today's presentation. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box on your Zoom control panel, and we can address those at the end during the Q&A session. And if you forget to ask a question, there will be a brief survey sent at the end of the webinar, and you can include your question there. We greatly appreciate all your questions and feedback. I am delighted to introduce Jody Gann, a professorial lecturer at American University in Washington, D.C., who has a passion for teaching public health and health promotion students. She previously served as the president of Maryland Public Health Association and has more than 30 years of experience planning, implementing, and evaluating public health programs. Prior to joining the faculty at American, she worked for federal and state governmental health agencies. Let's get started with the learning objectives. So in this webinar, Jody will describe the developmental hallmarks of adolescence and current data reflecting teen mental health trends. She will identify the many factors that have contributed to worsening teen mental health, and she'll also spotlight interventions for teens, parents, community, and societal programs, resources, policies to help teens navigate challenging times. So we look forward to Jody delving into those topics. So Jody, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, David. Good afternoon and happy National Public Health Week. Thank you for being here for the webinar. So why is the author of a textbook on health promotion presenting on what many are calling the teen mental health crisis? Well, I feel that it's important for those studying health promotion to recognize the hallmarks of adolescence, to know factors that have contributed to worsening teen mental health, and to learn about interventions that address the problem. And this is covered in Chapter 8 of my book, the chapter on stress, mental, and emotional health. Users of the textbook likely teach college students who may have experienced poor mental health as teenagers and even now as college students. Pictured here are the teens in the freshman seminar I teach on teen mental health, which has been a great source of information for this webinar. And many attendees of this webinar I see may be parents of teens or have teens in their lives who they are close to. So let me start with another question for you. When do you think adolescence begins and ends? It begins with the onset of puberty, which now can start as early as 10 and ends in the mid-20s. It's characterized by the maturation of the body, intensification of the capacity for learning, and emergence of personal identity. So this is an eventful time in the lifespan. And there are many reasons why puberty is beginning earlier and earlier, such as overnutrition. And there are many reasons why adolescent brain development has extended into the 20s, with parents bearing responsibility as caregivers of their children for longer being one reason. So, did you know that adolescents comprise nearly 1/4 of the population? In their 2019 consensus study report, the National Academy of Sciences calls for our understanding and support so that we can harness the promise of adolescence rather than focusing on the negatives associated with this life stage. And I'm sure we'd all agree that teenagers really do get a bad rap. So, you all are probably very familiar with the physical changes that accompany adolescence, known as puberty. These are the hallmarks of puberty for those assigned males and for those assigned females at birth. And although a teen may appear physically mature, they are not adults and cannot be expected to think or act as adults. I love these photos, which show children on the brink of puberty and then many years later, closer to the end of adolescence. So thank you, Dr. Reitman, the director of American University Student Health Center and instructor of adolescent medicine at Georgetown University's Medical School, who comes in and gives a lecture in my teen mental health class and shared this great slide with me. So, the increase in testosterone and estrogen that are responsible for the physical changes we just saw also cause the brain to radically change. The neurobiology of the teenage brain is fascinating and underappreciated. At this stage in life and at a rate not seen since infancy, we see an explosion in the formation of neurons. And neurons are the cells that transmit electrical signals through the axons. Those are the long tips at the end of the neurons to the dendrites, the antenna-like branches that form tiny gaps that we call synapses. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin are chemicals that help make these connections between the regions of the brain. And that results in a teen brain that is just so sharp and firing away. And myelination is also occurring, and this refers to the fatty sheath that's formed around those axons, and this provides an insulation that helps with the transmission of the signals, both in quality and speed. So, because of this period of tremendous brain development, some reorganization or pruning occurs with all the neural connections that began in infancy, keeping only those connections that are most needed. And as a result of this pruning for efficiency, the gray matter, which is the surface of the brain, actually decreases, while the volume of the white matter, which you can see here at the center of the brain, increases because of the myelination and that fatty sheath. So the brain becomes much more efficient at processing information, abstract thinking, and strategic problem solving. We call this neuroplasticity when, in response to new experiences, social interactions, and learning opportunities, the brain reshapes and refines itself adaptively to fit the need of the individual. So, this stage of life is designated as a sensitive period. As events experienced during this time, and they can be both positive and negative, can have a uniquely consequential effect on future outcomes and behaviors. And this is important to remember when we try and understand all the recent happenings that have contributed to the teen mental health crisis. So, I also want to talk more about what I said earlier, that teens cannot be expected to think as adults. And the frontal part of the brain, the part of the brain involved in judgment, organization, planning, and strategizing, that doesn't reach full maturity until around the age of 25. So, probably a lot of parents in the audience are nodding in agreement with me. So, hopefully, this mini lesson on neurobiology helps us understand typical teen behaviors like risk taking, heightened self consciousness, sensation seeking, and feeling embarrassed. And understanding the neurobiology of the teenage brain is especially helpful as we unpack some of the recent trends in teen mental health. The next few slides are from the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey Data Summary and Trends Report for the years 2011, 2021, which reflects data collected every 2 years among a nationally representative sample of US high school students. This report also reflects 10-year trends on health behaviors and experiences that include sexual behaviors, substance use, suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and experiences such as violence and poor mental health. The report also highlights disparities in these important outcomes by sex, race, and ethnicity, and sexual identity. And it's CDC's Division of Adolescent and School Health that brings us this important data. So the report uses red, yellow, and green signals to indicate the direction of the trend. And so here you can see that over the 10-year period, teen mental health has been on a major decline. in that we are seeing increases in the percentage of high school students who experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, seriously considered attempting suicide, made a suicide plan, and attempted suicide. These are all moving in the wrong direction. In 2021, 42% of high school students felt so sad or hopeless almost every day for at least 2 weeks in a row that they stopped doing their usual activities. And female students, you can see almost 60%, were more likely than male students to experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. Hispanic and multiracial students were more likely than Asian, Black, and white students to experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. And 70% of LGBTQ plus students and students who had any same-sex partners were more likely than their peers to experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. So let's talk about some of the reasons for the troubling trends. When COVID-19 hit and shut down school buildings, it introduced many triggers for poor mental health. Young people were apart from friends and social connections. They suddenly had little structure and routine, and more of their lives went online. Many families were under added financial stress, and many young people endured the trauma of losing loved ones to COVID. The pandemic caused teens to miss important milestones like prom and graduation. And when schools were not open, many students lost the chance for a teacher or another adult at school to notice that they were suffering from loss, grief, fear, and possibly abuse. However, as you could see from the trend slide, teen mental health was already declining before COVID. The decline in mental health correlates with the rise in teen smartphone usage, screen time, social media, taking teens' time, distracting them from healthy activities like physical activity and sleep, and affecting their self esteem. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in a little bit. Some say that the recession of 2008 made parents tense and extra worried about their and their children's economic survival, increasing pressure on kids to excel in school and in their activities. Parents were also more anxious because of increased crime, and a looser parenting style actually became frowned upon. Um, a less playful childhood is also thought to be responsible for more stressed out teenagers. And aside from the pandemic, our teens have experienced a lot of troubling events in their short lifetimes: school shootings, racial injustice, fears about climate change, political and international strife. This has really led to intensified feelings of gloom and doom for young people. And lastly, and is nothing new, there seems to always be a shortage of mental health professionals and services in our schools to help youth in need. And this is a time when we need these school personnel more than ever. So having the CDC put out a morbidity and mortality weekly report on the sudden rise in emergency department visits alerted the nation that our teens were not doing well. Dr. Vivek Murthy, the U.S. Surgeon General, issued an advisory regarding protecting youth mental health. You probably remember past Surgeon General advisories on smoking and tobacco use by Surgeon General Luther Terry and AIDS by Surgeon General C. Everett Koop. And just like with these monumental reports, this was a wake-up call. This report focused on the effects of the pandemic on youth mental health, but also raised awareness about the declines that were happening before COVID that I just mentioned. And then a few years later, Dr. Murthy issued another advisory on social media and youth mental health. Again, screen time and social media use increased during the pandemic, but it was on the rise well before COVID once more teens started using more smartphones. So here in this figure, you can see a very large upturn in major depressive episodes among teens beginning around 2012. So what changed between 2010 and 2014? It's the combination of both smartphones and access to social media platforms. So Jonathan Haidt, in his book, The Anxious Generation, calls this period the great rewiring of childhood, which was similar for both genders, but the effects were worse for girls, and the increase happened across all races and social classes. You can see from the diagram that things got worse in 2021 with the COVID pandemic, but the great majority of the rise was in place before COVID. Okay, so here I've got three figures. And in the first figure, you can see that the arrival of the smartphone in 2007 really changed life for everyone. And that's considered the first wave of this influence of technology. The second wave occurred in 2012 to 2013 with the rapid increase in the paired technologies of social media and smartphones. And this is exactly when girls' mental health began to collapse and boys' mental health changed in different ways. If you think about it, teens were no longer using the family desktop on these apps, but they could use the apps in the privacy of their own rooms on smartphones and just started spending way more time on the apps. Okay, the figure in the middle reflects that unstructured time with friends, just hanging out with friends plummeted in the exact years that adolescents moved from basic phones to smartphones. And then in the third figure, so beginning in the 90s, we were actually making some good progress in getting teens to get more sleep. Teens are supposed to get about 9 hours a night, but that started to reverse with higher social media use. So there's good reason for parents who have rules where teens must dock their phones in the kitchen for the night. So let's take a look at some of the effects of too much social media and screen time. Girls who say they spend 5+ hours each weekday on social media, and so many do, are 3 times as likely to be depressed. Girls' aggression tends to be more relational, and social media offers girls endless ways to damage other girls' relationships and reputations. Girls more easily share emotions and disorders, and unfortunately, depression is more contagious than happiness or good mental health. Girls are also more likely to be subject to predators and harassment. We know that the internet makes it easier for men to stalk and harass women. So, social media is a trap that does ensnare more girls than boys. But there's issues for boys too. And video games in particular are shown to cause declining mental and physical health for boys. And increased access to pornography has been damaging as well to boys' mental health. So overall, screen time has pulled young people out of their real world communities. And this is not going to be a surprise, but experiments show that mental health improves when people reduce or eliminate social media, especially if they can cut down on social media for about 3 weeks or more. So, this is good advice to parents and adult figures as well. So, I do want to mention some positive trends revealed by CDC's YRBSS data. Risky sexual behavior has been decreasing. Just 6% of teenagers reported having 4 or more lifetime sexual partners, compared with 15% in 2013. Substance use is also on the decline. Just 22% of teens reported drinking in 2023 versus 35% in 2013. 17% said they smoked marijuana, compared with 23% in the decade prior, even with the legalization of marijuana in many states. Female and LGBTQ plus students were more likely than other groups to report alcohol and drug use. So we also see a decrease in the proportion of youth who report being bullied at school. But this is not a measurement of bullying that may be occurring online. So that's important to consider as well. So, for those teens who report substance use, the top reason they use is to feel mellow, calm, or relaxed. So, I think that's really important to consider as we're talking about teen mental health. Other reasons for substance use include to have fun or experiment, not a surprise, to sleep better, to stop worrying, forget bad memories, to make something less boring, and to help with depression or anxiety. 41% indicated that they use substances to help with depression or anxiety. So, are things looking up? We are awaiting the official most recent Wire BSS report, and I'm really hoping that the researchers at CDC's Division of Adolescent and School Health are still employed in doing this important work. But early data reflects improvements over the past few years in sadness among teen girls. So that this is really good news. And this may be partly attributed to an increased focus on getting teenagers earlier access to mental health services, particularly providing such care at pediatricians' offices. That's been a real push that's been quite helpful. So again, we are really looking forward to getting this data to help us monitor the trend and hoping that things are looking up for young people. So, what kinds of interventions are helping or could help more? In my textbook, Health Promotion Moving Forward, almost half of each chapter is devoted to an ecological approach for addressing the risk factor that that particular chapter addresses. And so, to explain this model that I have up here very quickly, the model describes the many factors that influence an individual's health and well being. There are forces at the interpersonal, organizational, community, and societal levels that have great bearing on our health as individuals. And to affect lasting change, we need interventions at each of these levels. In public health, we promote interventions at the community and societal levels that are often in the form of policies. And, policies really can be the most impactful for the health of the population. Okay, so at the individual level, and we're thinking like, what can teens do themselves to improve mental health? There are healthy habits that teens can establish to help them manage stress and their mental health. Hey, adults can do these too. These include maintaining a healthy social support network, engaging in regular physical exercise, getting an adequate amount of sleep each night, journaling, expressing gratitude, and keeping a gratitude journal kind of combines both of those, can be really helpful to teens. Um, Helping others, getting involved in volunteer work and doing good for others just is kind of a way to hack the happiness chemicals in our body. Engaging in hobbies that bring joy, and avoiding unhealthy coping mechanisms like alcohol and other drugs, like we just spoke about. And all this great guidance comes to us from the American Psychological Association. Okay, I don't know why this is cut off on the top of the slide, but I am now addressing the interpersonal level, and that's where we consider the role that family and friends have on the mental health of teens. And here, given the audience, I've decided to focus on what parents can do. So, getting teens to talk about their feelings, fears, and what stresses them out can be immensely helpful to teens. And it's really important to listen and not to jump in too quickly with advice or a solution. Let them vent. Often this happens in the car. So when your kids are ready to talk in the car, just quiet down and listen. That's where you're going to get some of your best information when you're driving them around places. We need to help boys get comfortable with expressing sadness, fear, and worry, and give them the safe space to do so. So having dads role model these things is a really excellent way to go. And likewise, girls should be allowed to feel angry. Um, and for both our sons and daughters, it's okay. Remind them that it's okay to have feelings of sadness. And it's just when those feelings persist for a while that we need to seek professional help. One of the authors I've cited a lot in this presentation, Lisa Damour, who wrote a best-selling book, The Emotional Lives of Teenagers, talks about, hey, it's normal to feel sad if your best friend is moving away or something like that. And we need to acknowledge that and not try and keep our teens from feeling sad when it's super appropriate to feel that way. Okay, involvement in sports teams, clubs, jobs, and after-school activities and volunteer activities like we just talked about can be a lifesaver. And with friendships, it's actually quality over quantity. And we know that having even just one really good friend is a protective factor for teen mental health. We need to give teens more real world freedom and not judge parents who are doing this. So this, means letting teens, do some more exploring of the world, and for them to be, helping out a little bit more with activities at home, with chores and other activities. Wait, I just need to plug in my computer here. I'm getting a low bat. Okay, we talked earlier, but it's important for parents to be mindful of sleep and screen time. And probably most important, we know that the most important protective factor for teen mental health is for having a consistent and trusted adult figure in their lives. And in most cases, that can be a parent. So somewhere in this presentation, I did want to address warning signs and when it's time to seek help for your teen. So if your teen or if a teen has been exhibiting some of these signs and symptoms almost every day for the last 2 weeks, it's definitely time to seek help. So that would be persistent, sad, anxious, or empty mood, feelings of hopelessness or pessimism, feelings of irritability, frustration, or restlessness, feelings of guilt, worthlessness, or helplessness, a loss of interest or pleasure in hobbies and activities, decreased energy, fatigue, or feelings just slowed down, difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions, difficulty sleeping, early morning awakening or oversleeping, changes in appetite or unplanned weight changes, aches or pains, headaches, cramps, or digestive problems without a clear physical cause that do not ease even with treatment. And then, of course, suicide attempts or thoughts of death or suicide. And all of these are things that our pediatricians are screening for a lot more since this wake-up call. Okay, and this slide too is missing its top, but this here I am talking about interventions at both the community and societal levels, which I said are so impactful. In here, I have listed an assortment of programs and policies that may help improve teen mental health, such as more opportunities for connection, so that we are offering teenagers great things to do in our communities to compete with the internet and social media. So important. We need more school counselors. We need more phone-free schools, and so many school jurisdictions are going phone-free for the whole day. more playful schools. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more a little later when I share some recommendations from my students. Later school start times help our teenagers get more sleep. And quoting Dr. Reitman, the adolescent medicine specialist, when our class asked him what he thought the biggest solution was to the youth mental health crisis, he said it was having teens get more sleep. So later school start times can help with that. Insurance coverage for teletherapy, especially for our teens in rural areas where mental health professionals are really lacking. And then raising the age of internet adulthood. And tech companies can definitely do a better job facilitating age verification on some of the apps. And we are seeing kind of some movement in this area. And then on the right, I've included some national programs that serve the country to address mental health emergencies. We have the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And also from the federal government, we have SAMHSA's hotline. That's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. So again, we really want to watch the funding cuts. Regarding these important lifelines to help. There are nonprofits and foundations that are available and doing just a wonderful job. The Trevor Project specializes in supporting the LGBTQ plus community with mental health services and hotlines and live chats and things like that. Another is the JED Foundation that my students really like as a helpful support. And then I want to give a shout out to Mental Health First Aid. This is a program that's being offered across the US and the world. It started in Australia. Mental Health First Aid is a course that teaches people how to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental illness and substance use disorders. And it's getting a lot of traction in the same way that so many of us were trained in first aid and CPR. So like traditional first aid training, mental health first aid training does not teach people to treat or diagnose mental health or substance use conditions. Instead, the training teaches people how to offer initial support until appropriate professional help is received or until the crisis resolves. And more than 2.5 million people across the US have been trained in mental health first aid. And I'm really excited. My students in my class at American University are going to start their training tomorrow on youth mental health first aid. Okay, so these are the books that I have talked about that my students in my Complex Problems freshman seminar on teen mental health at AU are assigned and that I've consulted for this presentation. Both books have recently been on the bestseller list. My students have enjoyed these books and have shared with their parents after the semester has ended. So speaking of my students, here they are again, last semester's students in the Teen Mental Health Seminar. And throughout the course, we unpacked in greater depth many of the issues I covered in this short webinar. And each week, we kept a running list of their advice on what could be done to ease the teen mental health crisis. I'm a firm believer that we need to listen to our teenagers for some of the solutions. As so many of us teach in our public health and health promotion courses, and it's a big theme in my textbook, community members are the experts about problems in their community. My students feel strongly, so I feel like my students, our teenagers can really serve as the experts that can offer us some solutions. My students feel strongly about making school more relaxed. They also talk about the value of sports teams and have all these great ideas, how every student should be on a sports team regardless of ability, just for the practice time and the camaraderie. And guess what? My students say that they're relieved when teachers and parents require that they take a break from their phones. In my class, we have a phone-free policy, and the students are awesome about observing it. You know, if there's an emergency or something has come up, they just leave the room to talk on their phone. But they have told me that they just enjoy the break and the ability to really focus. So I can share more about what they're suggesting, but the point here is that we must look to our teens to help us understand this complex problem, which was beginning to subside, or ease, I should say, before all the funding cuts to education, mental health, public health, and surveillance. You can see how important it is that we have this data to help us monitor teen mental health. So here are my references, and I want to thank you very much for your time today and your interest and concern about teens, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Jody. We have some questions in the Q&A box. First, how do you handle the triggering aspects of youth mental health first aid training, balancing the need for it as well as the parts of it that can be triggering for those who have dealt with mental health struggles? Do you have any advice there?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And I mean, it's a problem in the course that I teach too, because you can imagine there's like a lot of self-selection. A lot of students sign up for this class, which is just one of like 50 freshman seminars that they can sign up for because they've struggled with their mental health. So some students are triggered by the conversations, and we just have, you know, a really safe space where students can leave or take a break whenever they want to, and it's no questions asked. And I think students knowing that they can take a break goes a long way, and some of them just knowing that they have an out, an exit, helps them kind of stay, because the material can be really helpful and affirming. I've in the mental health first aid training, they do the exact same. There's lots and lots of trigger warnings and things like that. And there's also a lot of support built in. Sometimes there are two instructors in the training so that one can keep teaching and another of the trainers can assist or support a participant that's having a hard time with the training.
Great. There was a question from much earlier in the presentation when you were talking more about neurobiology. Can you explain briefly what overnutrition is?
Yes, overnutrition is just excess calories that just cause the body to start maturing at an earlier age.
Great. All right, I have another question. Going back to your point about, I guess, students needing or actually requesting and liking when you stop their screen time. So how can parents feel more empowered to set up that kind of routine? What do you suggest
Yeah.
for parents?
Well, I'll just say, like, so in my class for teaching these first year seminars, we were actually encouraged. It's not just the teen mental health seminar that was encouraged to go phone free. It was all of them. And we were encouraged to actually take the phones and put them in a bag, you know, like you're at a comedy club or something. But we didn't do that. I just had students, you know, turn over their phones. So they felt a little more secure or a little less insecure. I mean, I wouldn't want to part with my phone for an hour either. So, you know, maybe not taking it completely away, but just really encouraging them to turn it off. I think it's a great idea if parents can go on the social media break too, and it's something that families do do together. That can help. You know, maybe just kind of, you know, planning more activities and things, you know, going to the theater or things where you really can't be on your phone, you know, more activities, you know, whitewater rafting or being out where it wouldn't be safe to have to have your phone. I know we can't all do really special things like that all the time, but trying to think of, activities that the family can do together, where they can leave their phones behind, or every family member can leave their phones behind. And like I mentioned earlier, at least the docking the phone in the kitchen for the night. I have to say that I would say many of the teens in my class said that their parents had that policy, and that was actually a good thing. I will say that the Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, who has kids just on the brink of those teenage years, also advises that if a lot of parents in a friend group kind of stick together on that, that can really help. So then there's nobody to be messaging at night if all of the friends have docked their phones for the evening.
That's good advice. Thank you. Another question that came up: what other programs in the community can help teenagers either by addressing mental health needs or getting them involved in meaningful endeavors? I think you kind of covered that a little bit, screen-free endeavors.
Well, that's probably my favorite thing to talk about. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. We just have to invest in resources, and they don't have to be super fancy. Teens want places to hang out. They have plenty of places to hang out online, but not enough to hang out, structures and cool places. We know that teens, like to hang out at Starbucks and coffee shops. We can simulate some of those environments about places that are helpful for hanging out. If you look at a college campus, everybody loves to hang out on campus in the cafes and things like that, things that don't feel like academic buildings. So I think, and we know that students like physical activity, like even pickleball is getting popular among teens. So just more social and recreational opportunities, having things in the evening, when teens just kind of come alive and are awake and want to hang out. um, so there are certain, just in the ways that communities are being rebuilt with more kind of gathering spots and centers. It's helpful for everybody, not just teens, if we have a place to congregate and connect socially.
Definitely. We have one more question. How can teens fully understand the negative influences of social media and some of the screen stuff that you've mentioned from these sources and Jonathan Haidt's book and so forth?
So my students really like Jonathan Haidt's book. I mean, it's really academic versus Lisa Damour's book, which is more kind of like a parenting guide. And they like both books, but they're interested in those graphs about the increase in depression that correlate with the years when smartphone use and social media apps exploded. So I think just showing I told you how, teens' brains are on fire, and they just showing them some of the data, I think, is good. There's lots of TV shows and movies and things like that that kind of portray the negatives of social media. I think teens are well aware of this. It's always the first answer they give me on why mental health is declining, more so on anything that's happening at home or with, their parents' child rearing. They usually point their fingers at social media. So I think that they get it.
Okay. Great. So we're going to end the Q&A session. If you still have a question, feel free to use the survey to pose it, and we'll get it back to Jody. Here's a slide with her textbook, Health Promotion Moving Forward, A Population Health Approach, that came out in the fall of last year, and we're really excited about its reception. So if you do see a copy in the future, please give us feedback on what you see as well. That'd be great. And here's a QR code where you can get a discount for the webinar. And we're excited to be in touch with you about other opportunities with using the book, either in a course or for other reasons. So please let us know how we can serve you. And I think that's it. Is that it with all the slides? Oh, wait, here we go. Thank you for watching. And please do fill out the survey. That helps us a lot. And we appreciate your time today. I know time is always limited. And we appreciate you coming to see Jody's presentation and have a blessed week and hope you guys have some good mental health and have some information to impart on teenagers.
Thank you.